This is just another false information, another kind of lies Putin says. Yesterday, he had a press conference with Russian media where he was repeating one lie after another. He, for example, said that he is not in the control of the troops on the ground and he has nothing to do with the abduction of Ukrainian children. So he's just repeating something that he wants Russian public to believe in, but in reality, nothing will happen until Russia remains on Ukrainian soil. And as all of we know, Russia made this part of Ukraine that it illegally occupies, according to Russian constitution. Ukraine, they call it part of Russia. They call it new Russian territories. So there is no way that Putin will withdraw the troops without Ukrainian making advance and by military means pushing Russians out of our territory.
Now, a peace deal with Ukraine isn't completely off the table, so says Russian President Vladimir Putin, suggesting that he could be open to proposals from African and Chinese leaders. But high-profile Kremlin critic and author of Red Notice, How I Became Putin's Number One Enemy, Bill Browder, told Times Radio Breakfast that Putin's announcement should be taken with a pinch of salt.
For Putin, the idea of backing down is just an impossibility, because if he does so, it shows extreme weakness, and it's the one thing that will end his career very quickly. And if he ends up out of power, he ends up in jail, he ends up losing his money, and he probably ends up dead. So I don't think there's any chance whatsoever of Putin being involved in any way in a peace treaty. There's, the Africans and Chinese can suggest whatever they want, but it's not going to happen.
Now, the Russian leader's announcement came hours after the government accused Ukraine of launching drone strikes that hit Moscow in the early hours of the morning. President Putin also announced a pledge of 30 new ships in a speech during the country's annual Navy Day parade. Let's welcome to the show Maria Avdeeva, a Ukrainian security expert covering the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Maria, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Maria, what did you make of President Putin's speech?
Well, Russia and Putin himself desperately need to show some power and to show some mighty, because Russia doesn't have any kind of success in Ukraine, whereas Russian military bases are constantly hit by long-range Ukrainian missiles in Crimea, and there are constant attacks on the territory of Russia. Ukraine doesn't claim responsibility for these attacks, for attacks on Moscow as well, but this is something that must humiliate Putin, and he desperately needs to show some power that he still maintains, and also to show power after the mutiny of Prigozhin, after that march to Moscow. So whatever Putin says, he is targeting the inner audience inside Russia, Russians, to show them that he still controls the power.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that any sort of peace negotiations are possible when Russian troops are still on Ukraine soil?
Absolutely no. This is just another false information, another kind of lies Putin says. Yesterday, he had a press conference with Russian media where he was repeating one lie after another. He, for example, said that he is not in the control of the troops on the ground and he has nothing to do with the abduction of Ukrainian children. So he's just repeating something that he wants Russian public to believe in, but in reality, nothing will happen until Russia remains on Ukrainian soil. And as all of we know, Russia made this part of Ukraine that it illegally occupies, according to Russian constitution. Ukraine, they call it part of Russia. They call it new Russian territories. So there is no way that Putin will withdraw the troops without Ukrainian making advance and by military means pushing Russians out of our territory.
So in your view, Maria, what's the end game here? This war has been going on long enough, I'm sure, for people in Ukraine. How do we find a way out?
Well, I think that the war will continue, and won't end soon. As Minister of Defense of Ukraine recently said that we should be prepared the war to continue for another year until Ukraine has enough capacities to liberate all its territories. Until that, while Russian troops are on the territory of Ukraine, there will be nothing happening. All the negotiations, according to Ukrainian officials, are possible only when all the territory is liberated, and then after that we can talk to Russia.
What is the mood on the ground, Maria? Sometimes when we talk about what the governments want, what the presidents want, what the army officials want, the generals, they have a plan, they have a strategy. We talk about them, but sometimes we forget about people. People of Ukraine have gone through a lot. Do you think that they still have the stamina to continue with this war for another year? Or is the idea of some possible peace talks going to be something that's attractive to some people in Ukraine?
Well, here we need to understand that Ukrainians do not believe anything what Russia says, and no
Right.
one here believes in any kind of peace talks, because this will mean that Russia will simply use the time they get to attack again. Because we have already seen it started in 2014, and Russia used this time to get more weapons, to collect more missiles and attack the whole of Ukraine. So no one here believes in any possibility of peace talks and anything that Russia says. It's on one hand. On the other hand, people, everyone here has already a lot of personal losses connected to the war. Everyone has lost a house, a loved one, a relative, someone is on the front lines fighting. So people have already sacrificed so much, it's no way they will say, okay, now we stop. No, everyone wants to see the victory, to liberate everything, and after that, Russia has to pay, and then there could be peace talks. And even, for example, when there is an air raid alert, and I go into the shelter and ask people there, what do you feel? They say, we hate Russians, but we are not afraid. Ukraine needs to win, and for that we are ready to do anything what it takes.
Maria, thank you so much for giving me your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Maria Avdeeva, Ukrainian security expert covering the Russian invasion of Ukraine.